Hey guys, and welcome back to Blessed Are the Geek. This is episode number 4, all about arcades, barcades, and pinball. We sit down with Jeremy Smith, the owner of Reboot Retrocade and Bar on Cherry Street in downtown Macon, Georgia, where we talk to him about his passion for arcade machines, pinball, and running his business, the Barcade. It's really interesting, and Jeremy is one of the few people where I could just listen to him talk for hours. It doesn't matter what topic it is, he's really good at speaking and really good at storytelling, and he's got a ton of information about everything in the world, really. Like, he is like one of the smartest guys I've ever known. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Blessed Geekcast. We have a Facebook group, Blessed Are the Geek, and we just now booked our first live podcast to be done at Reboot Retrocade in downtown Macon, and that's going to be going on February 12th, I believe, which is a Monday. So you should come out for that and check it out. It's going to be about 8 o'clock. I think we're going to have some giveaways and some other stuff, so definitely check it out. Come out and have some fun, and without further ado, here is that podcast. All right, so this is episode number 4 of Blessed Are the Geek, and we're sitting here with Jeremy Smith.
Hey guys, how's it going?
He owns a retro arcade bar called Reboot, and if you haven't heard of that, you're going to hear about it soon because this is something that's sort of like sweeping across the nation now. And you guys actually just got back from a trip where you saw, 5 or 6 of them or something?
Yeah,
like that?
we went to 6 barcades along with several different pinball museums, which were very interesting. I took a swing through Asheville and went up the East Coast on the way to southern Pennsylvania around DC and saw a good bit. I mean, there's a good bit of them now, especially in the Northeast. They're starting to catch on out west, and eventually they're going to fill in the middle. I mean, Atlanta's already got 3 that sort of have that model. Yeah,
I must have missed that.
Yeah, I mean, Flashback is a little more of a pure arcade, but they do serve alcohol. They're not a true barcade in the sense that they push the bar heavily. A barcade is a little bit different from an arcade in that an arcade features the games very, very heavily. A barcade also features the games, but the drink menu is also as important. We run our barcade as a bar with arcades in it.
Right.
It's a bit of a different model. If you're an arcade that just, we have a bar,
right.
We serve drinks, but the games are the focus, then you kind of structure your model that way. A lot more of those tend to be free play rather than pay for play.
So their model is more on the lines of like you pay to enter, and
right.
As long as you're in there, free games, and then you can buy drinks or whatever.
Exactly.
Unlike your venue where you guys actually charge for the game, it's like 1 token per play on any machine, which is nice. So it's not like which ones take 2 quarters, which ones take 3 quarters. So everything takes a single token, which are quarters, and then you guys have an awesome drink menu too. So like every week, it seems you guys have a special themed new set of drinks that come out. So like I know you had one recently for the Game of Thrones premiere where you had 3 new drinks.
And 3 new drinks, and we revived 2 old menu drinks just for that week. We rotate our drink menu heavily. Like I said, we are a bar first, so we encapsulate and focus on that. That's more of my other business partner. Whitney handles more of like that financial stuff, and then our manager Andy keeps that on track because my focus is usually on the games.
Right.
I'm the games end of it, and we do have a huge passionate game niche that are constantly, what new arcades are coming in, when is that happening, which is great because you kind of get the best of both worlds. If I was a pure arcade, my game turnover would have to be very, very high to maintain interest, or you have to be such a draw that you get new market. So it's kind of how you treat your market, and you have all the awesome stuff of a bar, and that you have regulars. Right. And they're there to drink and see what new games are there, but they tend to be a little bit more forgiving of the pure arcade model because the pure arcade model is like, well, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Because arcade games are really only meant to last between 5 to 15 minutes, and 15 minutes is a big deal, and that's only if you're chasing a high score on something like Donkey Kong or your experience Tetris.
Yeah.
And you're really pushing the boundaries of what that game's supposed to do because it's meant to take your money.
Right.
It's meant to act quickly. It's meant to be fun in small spurts, take your money or force you to feed more money to continue levels.
Sure.
So that's the difference. And it lends itself to drinking because you play a game and then
Right.
go buy a beer and you wander over to something else. So we push a lot of diversity. We have several pins. We're adding new pins. The Shuffle Alley or the Shuffle In
Right.
puck bowler that you just saw out back. It's on the
Which is
truck
really cool.
outside. Very large,
It's got
very
giant,
cool.
10 actual pins in it.
Yeah.
That you bowl into. And,
Yeah.
It's not a digital game. It's a very analog game.
Right. Very, very analog. Switches come up out of the bottom and they're interacted with. I mean, we have a good mix of those kind of games, which is great because it's something new, something that people get to experience from a history side of things. Because a lot of these games now are getting into the third decade of their cycle. So it's not the new games. And I have a couple of sort of this millennia games. I've got Crazy Taxi, which is 1998, which I think is our newest game. And you kind of get to see the range of that kind of stuff.
But you also have a lot of stuff that's like, it's new to me. So
Right.
we were just talking about Time Soldiers here, which is a really, really interesting play style for an arcade.
Right.
Which if you've never played it, so if you're listening and you've never played it before, you control, is it 8 points of control?
Yeah, so it's a 8-way regular joystick that has an 8-way rotational joystick built into it. So
Right.
the one joystick does both things. It turns you and it rotates you. Think about it in modern terms, almost like Geometry Wars, where it's a dual analog, except it all happens on one stick.
Yeah.
So think about all
First
that
time I played it, I
complexity.
was like really confused trying to wrap my head around it. And some of the arcade machines, I wish the joystick was actually on the right rather than the left.
Yeah.
So like things like Tetris, I wish the stick was on the right so I could use my right hand to move things faster. And something like that where you have to not only control but also click. It's like turning a bottle cap or something.
Right.
You like click it left and right to change your direction, and people will come at you in different directions.
Yep.
I think that's probably the most interesting.
The thing about that is that it's one of those things that a lot of people don't remember it from their childhood. Romstar as a company, when those games started to come out, the reason Romstar sort of made joysticks that way is if you were trying to break into the arcades in the mid 80s and early 90s, when it was really the heyday of the arcade. You know, a lot of people think the heyday of the arcade is somewhere in the mid 80s, and that's when it was really starting to pick up. There were new arcades popping up everywhere, but the industry was still getting off its feet. By the late 80s, early 90s, if you weren't bringing something new to the game, operators wouldn't pick you up. Arcades wouldn't pick you up as a company because why? I can put a Galaga there. I can put a next level Street Fighter there. I can, the next iteration of
Something
Street
that's
Fighter.
going to make a lot of money.
Right, because back in those days, people went to the arcade. They went with $5 in quarters, and they were dropping 2 quarters a game and stuff. And so they were there to play one thing, and that was the things that. Because you also had home consoles starting to come out at that time and getting very prevalent, and all the home console games were the arcade games ported.
Right, 83, 85.
Right, 83, 85, and then you had the resurgence of Nintendo home consoles in the late 80s, early 90s, and almost all their stuff had arcade iterations. And the really big point was that people wanted to be able to practice at home and then take those skills back to the arcade to show their friends. So you had arcades in those days that would have 3 or 4 of the same game, Street Fighter 2s, from standard World Warrior all the way up to Hyper Championship Edition, because those brought in money.
Right.
Why experiment with something that looks like every other cabinet? So you have to do something like that. You need to come up with crazy new control schemes. You get the late 80s through about 96 is really the arcade manufacturing era, where you get these crazy looking cabs that do all kind of weird stuff. And it actually makes it really fun. That was the big era of pinball as well. That's when pinballs moved from System 8s to System 11s. Bally's, Stern was just hitting their stride. Williams was still in the pinball game. There was a high level of competition. And you had movie rights being sold. They were paying millions of dollars up front and producing very short-run cabs.
Terminator and Hook.
Right, Terminator, Hook, Waterworld, of all things.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
The Waterworld pinball, for those of you that hate and loathe Waterworld, if you ever see a Waterworld for play somewhere, I encourage you to play it. It's one of the few, I think, Shadow, Waterworld, or the Shadow, Waterworld, And I think probably Batman Returns, or not Returns. Which is the one with oh my gosh, the terrible one, the second to last one with Uma Thurman, I think. Batman Forever?
Yeah.
Batman Forever. All excellent pins. Terrible movie properties.
Yeah.
Excellent pins. Amazing pins. Extremely fun to play. All kind of crazy little nuances to them. I mean, there's still pinheads out there that, they call themselves pinheads. And I'm
not bowling. This is pinball.
This is pinball. This is pinball. I'm more of what they call a slap shooter when it comes to pinball. I just hit the flippers and stuff goes where it may. But those little cards in the bottom left, yeah, you too?
Yeah, that's how I play.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to hit this and, it went straight into the bottom.
Oh, but a lot of those things have these little cards in the bottom left. Read those if you get a chance on any pinball machine, because it tells you what all the mini games are. And sometimes trying to get those mini games in order, not only does it give you a ton of points, but all kind of cool stuff happens. I mean, that's how you get a pinball to really be a game.
Yeah.
That's really the game end of pinball, where it's less random.
I can't remember what machine it is, but I know there's been like one or two machines, and I'm actually going down to Gulf Shores pretty soon that has a big family fun center kind of place. It's got a whole like pinball room. I'll show you the room. It's pretty cool. But I remember they had a certain pinball machine that I played over and over and over again because it had a certain thing in the middle that like once you hit it enough, something would happen, and then I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton.
Those are the things that pull me back. Those pinball machines, like, oh, cool. It's like I don't have to read anything. Like I know, like I just
gotta hit that thing. Yeah. I mean, if you ever get the chance out there in podcast land to play a haunted house or a black hole, and they're in good condition, I was very lucky. I came across both of those at the Roanoke Pinball Museum. An excellent. What they've done is they don't have as big of a pinball collection as some of the larger ones, but all their stuff is very, very well maintained. I'm talking about showroom quality,
right?
That you just don't see, especially out of those old System 8 machines. And it actually has two decks. So there is the play surface, which you see.
Right.
There's an upper level to the play surface, and then underneath the play surface, underneath it, that you actually drop through a hole and drop underneath the play surface, and you can see through a little window, is another mini pinball playfield.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah, and in Haunted House has that. It's called the basement, and then you have the main floor, which is the regular play surface, and then you have the attic. God. And then Black Hole, you're playing, and you're out on the edge of the black hole, and then you go through the black hole to another dimension, and that's the drop. And they're all incredible. Those are machines that are so maintenance heavy. You not only have to be an expert, but you got to have a lot of financial.
Well, I've seen you almost every single time I come there, which is like 3 times a week. I see you working on an arcade machine. If you're there, you're probably working on a pinball machine almost every time.
Yeah.
And there's actually a really great 99% Invisible episode about arcade cabinets. It's an older one, but they go into the nuances of how analog they are and everything like that.
Right.
So we're going to direct people to that to look that up.
Yeah.
If they want some more information on that, 99% Invisible. But I see you working on these pinball machines, and I know you're spending hours on every time. That's only with one playfield. I can't imagine like how much time you'd spend like trying to maybe even just like undo one that's got 3 levels to it.
So that playfield basically sits on a series of brackets that hold it to the upper surface playfield. So to even access that lower playfield, you have to raise the regular playfield and then drop that playfield off. You have to dismount it, pull it, and set it on a separate table. And pinball machines are hard to work on for the simple fact that everything you see on the surface, you only see about 20% of the mechanics, what's happening. You open it, and all the mechanics are on the bottom, but you can't turn it over and set it on its top. So you have to stand it up on its edge and work on it, leaning over the cabinet. If anyone out there...
Some of the machines, though, have like a hinge on them so that they can like prop themselves up?
Yes, so they build the cabinets to have that prop, but if you've ever worked on a car, anybody out there in podcast land that works on their car and knows that, I'm just leaning over, it's not so bad. After about 10 minutes, your lower back starts to hurt. Yep. You have to do that for a pinball machine, unless it's serious.
Kneeling a little bit, or like
right. It's like a kneeling squat, bend over.
Weird angle.
Yeah, especially when you're as tall as I am, and it's hollow inside the pinball machine, so you can't prop on anything.
Yeah.
You can't lay across something. So it's got its own challenges, but it's one of those things that if you have a passion for old school electronics or just learning, circuitry is making a real comeback now. Parts. I got into the hobby kind of right at about the right time because 10 years ago, there was Radio Shack. But if you wanted really, really specific stuff, and some of those arcades and pinballs require very specific diodes, very specific rectifiers, you'd have to order it. It'd take them a couple weeks, and you had to order 5 or 10 of them, unless they just happen to have it in the drawer there, And I come from Jackson, Georgia, and we have one of the last Radio Shacks in the country.
Right.
It's still a Radio Shack, and I'm very lucky in that they bought up about every other Radio Shack in the region, so they have tons and tons of parts. But internet's a great resource now, and circuitry as a hobby is making a huge comeback with robot building, the Pi movement, the Raspberry Pi movement, and robotics and small robotics, and that return to electrical engineering. If you have a passion for those sort of things, I would say maybe get your hands on an arcade and really see how it feels. The bad part about that is it's kind of inflated some values on stuff, but you can still find real gems out there. You still can. It may not be a Pac-Man or Galaga because those are mainline games, but take a crack at it. I mean, one of the first cabinets I got was that Time Soldiers.
Well, there's a lot of games out there. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of movies out there that are way underrated. There's a lot of stuff out there that's like way better than the stuff that all the public knows about. So even if you don't pick up a Pac-Man cabinet or a DK cabinet, you're probably still going to pick up something that's really worth playing.
Really good. You
like your Shuffle In today.
Like the Shuffle In today. Got a great value on it.
Oh, I just got it. It's like Shuffle In, like you're walking.
Exactly.
I got it.
Exactly. And it's awesome. The back glass, it's from an era when all that stuff was still in bars. So you kind of got these little rats on there, and they're running a saloon, one of them smoking a cigarette. It's a mirrored back glass. It's incredible, the artwork. And a lot of that stuff was hand-painted back in the day. The butterfly behind you now, hand-painted back glass from Sonic. That came out of Madrid, Spain. Underrated games out there, stuff like Phoenix by the Centauri company that was based in Florida. Made all their games, and it's a great game. People will say, well, it's kind of a Galaga rip, but the gameplay is so different. You get a shield, you use directional buttons instead of a joystick. Really good game. Games like Bubbles, which is a sleeper hit. I mean, you get the right kind of buyer, and a Bubbles cab will go for $1,500, but you can still find them randomly out in the wild, converted into something else.
Right. So let's switch a little bit away from pinball because I think we've hit a lot of that. So we've had a lot of different discussions in the bar about arcade cabinets and what it takes to run the business of an arcade cabinet, or what it takes to run the business of a barcade, and some of the legal loopholes that you guys have to jump through a little bit. So there's I'm gonna set you up. There's a sticker on every single one of your arcade cabinets. What is that about?
Right. So the state of Georgia has certain laws about gambling. We don't have casinos, but we do allow poker machines. It's the video poker machines, and they put them in gas stations, and you can't use payouts on them. But essentially, it's the way for the tax revenue office to track machines, both Class A and Class B. My machines are pure entertainment, non-redemption machines, so they're considered Class A. So the only redemption you have is entertainment. It's still considered technically a redemption machine because I put money in it and I get something out of it. Yeah, a gumball machine is technically a redemption machine.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's their way of collecting tax revenue. It used to be a percentage. What you used to do is track all your coin sales essentially and then pay on your income. But now you pay per machine, and your proof that you're paying that tax is that sticker. And then you pay a locational tax as well. So it's more of you have to pay all your taxes up front. It is significant. I find it's a barrier for most people to opening a barcade. A lot of people go to that free play model for the simple fact that they can kind of sidestep some of that. I don't know if the state's going to close that loophole. I track it just to kind of see. I don't really have to worry about it too much. The free play model hurts you though in the sense that you don't know what machines are actually getting played. You can look at play counters and kind of track play, but the way that we do it, even with tokens, at least because there's a monetary exchange, I can sort of take some of that token money and put it back into game repair. I know, I'm not deriving a profit off my games, but my games are in a way kind of paying for themselves. I don't have to look at my door, what I'm taking from the door, and see that as, well, how much of that is game maintenance, what percentage? So it actually makes the maintenance end a little bit easier because when I go to buy parts, I know I sold X number of tokens this month. That game is going through this many parts. This is what it costs to repair. Is it worth keeping on the floor, or do I put it in private collection for a while, kind of let it let it fall out of people's minds and bring it back. That's why Phoenix is here at the house today, and so is Time Soldiers. I love them, and people ask about them now that they're off the floor, and they'll probably make a comeback at some point.
Sure.
They're in the private collection for now.
So some people might think that, oh, I want to open a barcade, so I'm going to get a bunch of cabinets and put a bunch of like Retrons in there or Raspberry Pis that have a bunch of emulators on there, and just like anybody can choose what they want to choose, or maybe I'll have just a Galaga cabinet or just a Super Pac-Man cabinet or whatever.
Right.
Because we've talked about this, and that's kind of tricky too.
Yeah, you start running into licensing issues. Unfortunately, a lot of those 60-in-1 boards are kind of what they're called. That's kind of the vernacular you use for them, because those were the first ones that kind of came out that have 60 games all on one board. You see them for sale a lot on Craigslist, which is fine. A lot of those are sold under private license. So what that is the games that are written on those are lifted, but they're for home play. In other words, you can't use them in a commercial setting to derive profit. And then they make a nice cabinet. Or they put it in an older cabinet, dress the cabinet up nice. And the reason they started doing that is people can't fit 60 games. Most people can't fit 60 games in a home.
Because it's not the size of an NES cartridge.
No, exactly. It's not like and people want the feel of an arcade, but they don't. So they don't necessarily want to play an emulated version on a computer, which is what that is. I mean, those boards are emulated, but you get to play it on original control panels. You get to play it in solid state, because 60-in-1 boards are solid state boards. There's no process to it. There's no GUI to it,
right.
Essentially. But I have a couple of those boards, but I run them in systems that still have their original boards. And what I do is I run those emulated versions, which are ROM lifts essentially of the original game board, and running them on new hardware, so that I don't tear up the older hardware. I do that for my Pac-Man machines, and I do that for my Galaga machines. Because Galagas, you'll burn through Galaga boards about every 3 months.
But in a commercial setting, in order to use a ROM or an emulation, you actually have to have the original board sitting there.
Right. It needs to be, the way that the copyright law sort of works is the board needs to be with the cabinet. And you need to have every board that's being emulated in that cabinet, because the ROMs you're using, a lot of those 60s-in-1s actually have stolen ROMs on them, actually have stolen ROM data that was just lifted. I have a chip reader. They're used as diagnostic materials, and you can port them over to an SD card, or you port them, write new chips, put it on new hardware, and you load it up. Doing that technically is illegal unless you take the old board and you put it right there next to it. And you go, I don't want to run it on that hardware, but that's those ROMs running on new hardware. So right. I own the ROMs. I have a legal copy of the ROM.
You actually have to port that board.
No, you don't have to, because the data is the same. The data is the same across 1,000 boards.
Okay.
But because I have a 1-for-1 ROM match of this, these are the ROMs that are running in this cabinet, and I have these original boards here. I've bought the commercial license by buying the boards. I bought the commercial license on those ROMs. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference. Which 99% of the time, they're not going to get a call from Namco or somebody, because it's up to those individual industries to track down those individual sort of violators. But it's sort of like the Napster era. Everybody's downloading all this free music and going, they'll never come after me. There's no point. And then they decide to randomly pick 100 people and sue the pants off of them because they're distributing the music. What if you end up in that unlucky lottery? Right. So I try to do everything on the up and up, and I try not to use some of the cheaper boards that guys use are actually rewrites. Like, they try to get around it by rewriting it and changing some of the code slightly, and some of the colors will be off, or some of those actual board errors that made games great, like Miss Pac-Man actually has several errors into the ROM of the board that if you get what's called a hack board, that's called a hack board. It fixes those problems. They actually write those problems out. Some of the beauty of Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man is some of those errors. I mean, there's a spot, I think on the third frame board, if you watch Billy Mitchell play, where you actually can run straight through a ghost. You just run straight to them. They never touch you. And you put them in a corner, and that's how people make high score runs, is that they trick the hardware. Well, if you write that out, it kind of loses some of its charm. You may say, well, isn't the game fixed now? Well, not really, because it's not what it originally was. If you're going to run a Retrocade, then the game that needs to be there needs to be the game that was what you played when you were young, or your parents played. Part of what we opened was so parents could bring their kids and say, this is what my life was like when I was young. These are what my games were like, and compare them to the new games that are out now.
In comparison, it's like I was just telling you the other night. I just downloaded the original Star Wars theatrical release.
Yeah.
Compared to whatever crap Lucas has done recently, and adding new scenes and replacing characters entirely in the movie and voices and all sorts of stuff. So I'm more of a purist when it comes to a lot of stuff like that.
Right.
So we were actually talking about maybe building me a Super Mario Brothers cabinet. But I was telling you that like I wanted specifically that ROM that's in that cabinet because there are very minor differences in that ROM than the original NES cartridge.
Right. I think the biggest thing there is what is considered a byte. So the byte data that you and I interpret as a byte, there's almost a universal concept of bit and byte, and this is what the pixel length is on so many bytes and all that kind of stuff, and it's 8-bit. I think Mario Bros. For the Nintendo ran on 8-bit, or is it 16? It's 8-bit.
Yeah.
It's 8-bit. Well, the board that we have is a Versus version of Super Mario Bros. So it runs on a Versus board. A Versus board runs an 8-bit, but it runs an 8-bit at a slightly higher clock speed. And it has a slightly higher pixel count on the output of that. So the boards are slightly bigger. Some of the gaps are slightly bigger. But the sprites that they built are the same size. So Mario's jump and his other stuff are the same as...
But all the environment
around him is slightly different. And some of the levels are completely different.
Yeah.
That you can't play. You can't play them on anything but the arcade version.
Right.
Because they were able to modify things. They had more processing power. So they added more paratroopers. They added more Koopa Troopas. They had more jumps. I think they have 2 kind of hidden levels in the arcade board. I've heard legend of. I've never been able to find them. I've ran through it twice. And they're just kind of these things where there are these extra parts of levels. And I usually end up, because it's an arcade cabinet, and it does have the entire game on there, and you could sit there for 30 minutes trying to play all of Mario Brothers if you ran it purely, but I always use warp pipes. So somewhere in those in-between levels, I think some of the water levels, there's huge additional sections of those levels because they had so much more space to work with. And then you have full board Mario, which is a 2-board setup, which runs sort of like a Donkey Kong board setup, if anybody out there knows arcades a little bit. There's 2-board setups and 4-board setups on those pure Donkey Kongs. And Super Mario Brothers had a pure board that was that, and it had even more processing space, and it runs at a slightly higher speed. And it's got those SKUs, those slightly bigger environments are very noticeable in that. You can set them side by side with the home console and see that there's 2 sprites off on some of the jumps where you are jumping and Mario is landing on his toe. Like literally his big toe lands and you're on the ground. So it's and there's spots that you're jumping on and landing on these little spaces and you have this like weird skid effect. From the cabinet that you don't have in the home console. You can jump with that home console and he just drops like a rock.
Yeah.
So this one has more skid because they had more processing power. They were able to kind of incorporate those sort of nuanced physics, I think.
Right.
The nitty gritty of the programming kind of still isn't within my grasp. I've only been in the hobby for a couple of years, but it's one of those things that I find just so very interesting and different. You know,
very tiny differences and stuff like that.
The very tiny differences that, you know, if someone was like you that has a massive Nintendo collection and is passionate, would want a Nintendo cab running a Super Mario Bros. I mean, that's maybe not even a Versus board. The key is finding the right kind of boards for a build like that. That's the biggest thing. And they're trying to get it right.
Now, speaking of boards, another thing that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which I found really interesting, was your Donkey Kong cabinet is really unique. And let people know about that and why Billy Mitchell decided to actually stop by your Retrocade.
Right. So we met Billy Mitchell, and for those that are the uninitiated, Billy, or have not seen King of Kong, go watch it. It's incredible. Nibbler's very good too. He appears in Nibbler. He's actually a really good guy, but to say this about Billy, he was the first professional gamer. He was the guy. He made the cover of Time magazine, in 86, 87. Set several world records that stood for 20, 25 years. Toured the globe and played arcades professionally, and is known for his Miss Pac-Man record. But he held the Donkey Kong record for 2 decades and set it at Twin Galaxies during a Time magazine shoot, like the most official possible way you could set one. There was media there, and the former champion had shown up to the Time Life shoot, and Billy said he was a liar and challenged him to a game, and the guy had obviously lied about his score, and Billy was doubled his score before he lost his first man, and
wow,
went on. The rest was history. He got around 900,000 before he got through all the frames. But our cab, to set a world record on a cab, it has to be an original Donkey Kong running original hardware with an original setup. You can't do it on an emulated board. So my Donkey Kong is pretty much 98% there. It's everything except probably the joystick. And really, the joystick they're not too adamant about as long as it's a locked 4-way. So I can make a 4-way panel that takes it away from being an 8-way and locks the directions. And could probably go. He has a record on it, right? He's got our high score right now. He's got the side of the cabinet.
Which he just gave up. He was like, yeah, I'm just going to double what you have.
Yeah, he just stopped. He just ran out of time. I don't think people understand the amount of time it takes to break a world record, especially Donkey Kong. Billy stood there for, I think, 20 minutes to get over 200,000. And he walks you through it. I think that's the real challenge. If you've seen King of Kong, you get a little bit of that, or the Nibbler movie, that there's a physical aspect to playing a cabinet. That's why I'm not huge. Some guys have the MAME versions broken, and they'll say, oh, it's the exact same. It's a 1-for-1 ROM, and if I'm running it on a computer at the same clock speed, it's the same data. It should count. To that I say, if that's true, then go do it on a cabinet. Stand there and do it on a cabinet, or sit on a stool and do it on a cabinet. If it's not that much of a challenge, go do it.
Right.
And see the physical difference that there is. I mean, you've sat and played Tetris. You can't stand there and go after that record. Our Tetris machine is 700,000, and by about the 100,000 point range, your feet start to hurt. Yep. You got to get a stool, and we have high chairs, and people sit there and they play them, but it's still hunching over. It's still not the same as sitting at a computer chair.
Right,
like a rolling computer, sitting comfortably. Because laptops can run those MAMEs now, and you can set it on your lap and you can go. And then even if you do like a Twitch recording of it where you prove that there are no pauses, the pause option's always there. Like it's there sitting in the background.
Sure.
That there's a comfort level to that.
Right.
Whereas an arcade cabinet, if you gotta do biology, like you got some biology business to do. I mean, Nibbler's a 1 billion point score. It takes something like 44 hours to break that record.
Yeah.
You have to take biology breaks. So you have to rack up enough lives that it doesn't matter that you die to buy yourself minutes to go do that. It's the same with Donkey Kong.
Well, so what else is there about running a business like this? Because there's a lot of people out there that's like, oh, this would be cool. I get to work in video games all day and see nerdy people.
There are...
Like, what are the biggest challenges to running a
The
market?
biggest challenges are probably figuring out what your model is for your market and then working in that market. I was very, very lucky in that my business partner and my life partner, Whitney, are very much, she went to, she's a Mercer graduate, great business school. She took business courses there, and she's an industrial management major, which is actually a Bachelor of Sciences degree. And she has a very good sort of economic mind, and she set all that up first. So do your market research. Do your market research. Have a strong business plan.
Right.
I think our parents are right. Do a business plan because it forces you to do that research and outline your markets and then attack that model and make it work for your games. Because there was discussion about doing a more modern feel to ours, adding in more console games, doing something that's closer to like Battle and Brew in Atlanta. And that could work down here, but you have turnover costs and other things that make not just doing that, but also running a bar.
Right.
So alcohol is what sells, and the games
that's where you make
are the
most
draw.
of your money.
Right, that's where I make most of my money. So I'm able to price the games cheaper and treat the games as a draw, where people can come through the door and enjoy the games, even people that don't drink, and maybe they'll purchase something while they're there, and that's where I derive my profit. It's the same why we have social space and room for tabletop gaming, and we have the lawn. It's about providing enough space for different kinds of people. So if you really want if you have the games, if you have a private collection and you want to do a barcade, I'm going to try to make money with my passion. Awesome, incredible, especially if you can fix the games yourself. If you start getting in the hole of having to send stuff off, It gets to be a pretty big monetary hole, and you start to rely on other people. I've relied on other people to fix boards before, and 9 times out of 10, they're amazing and they come through. It's that one time, and it's usually a board that's very, very important that they either screw up or it never comes back. And it happens. It happens in the hobby, and it happens with every kind of hobby. I mean, it's just like classic cars. You have people that say they can fix them and don't, or all kinds of problems. But if that's what you're passionate about, find a way to derive the profit. Just be sure to do your research. I've had people ask me about it. What are the challenges? And we've been able to sidestep most of our challenges by doing the work on the front end. It took us a year to get the bar from concept to door. And that's what it takes to open a business. You have to be persistent. You have to keep your nose to the grindstone. And there's going to be people that tell you it's a bad idea and it won't work. But if you've done your research and you trust your numbers, what you can do is take that advice, because it's given as advice. And no advice, given freely is a bad thing. Take it, absorb it, even criticisms. See what they're saying. Compare it to what you know based on your research. And if you trust your research and you can compare those numbers and you have answers to those questions that they bring up, then you're fine. You're great. If they bring up questions that you cannot answer, that you cannot find answers to in your research, do more research. Try to adjust your plan to work. Because there's different models of this. There's no one right way to do it. If you want to get your games out there and have them played, be ready for them to get beaten up. But if you really, I have a passion for working on them. I like it. It's always something new. Every single game is different. It's completely made different.
It's like working on cars.
It's like working on cars. Everything's different. There's no manufacturer standard.
Right.
You didn't hit manufacturer standards until the early 90s, and that was the JAMA standard and the AMA standard. And even though those pin sizes and the actual harness are the same, Konami said, okay, we're going to use JAMA harnesses, but we're going to pin them differently. So, there's always a little bit of nuance. There's always a little bit of difference.
Wasn't Konami the one that snuffed their noses at Nintendo too about their cartridges?
Yep.
Yeah.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where are they? Where are they now?
That's right.
But you got Konami. You got Konami to blame for some of the best 4-player games out there. I mean, they can make 4-player games. You look at Sunset Riders, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which that all came off the same hardware. But those games play beautifully. The Simpsons. They were all those 2-button Konami 4-players, and they fitted them all on a standard JAMA connector, which is amazing from a hardware standpoint. So I mean, there's positives and negatives to each manufacturer, and many of them are gone now. The old standbys are still kicking. That's for a reason. They made quality products. Any Nintendo cabinet game is incredible. Castlevania Versus, I had a chance to play, and it's amazing. It's every bit as amazing as you'd think it would be. I'm hoping to have a Laserdisc game here soon, which will be like Dragon's Lair or probably Fast Draw is what I have right now in storage. I'm going to start trying to assemble it and start working on it. But, I mean, if you have a real passion for it, for sure pursue it. Just do your research first and know what works, and then scale your business size. Just because you have 50 cabinets doesn't mean you need to get them all in there at once. Get a smaller space that's more affordable, put 15 in, and have a heavy rotation. If you're willing to do the legwork to do that, it's worth it. Because it always stays new and fresh. If a game disappears for a month and a half or 2 months and then it hits the floor again, all those people that loved that game are going to come back at least once to play it one more time.
So what is, again, shifting gears here a little bit, what is, I kind of want to go back to pinball and arcade and, your passions and the things that you are most passionate about. What would you say is the best part of pinball? Or the most frustrating part of pinball?
The most frustrating part of pinball is the high voltages that you deal with. Most pinball machines don't just have 5 and 12 volt. They have 43 volt, 23 volt, and some of them have 120 volt running through them. Which is like house power.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of different voltages, and if you if you're running tests where you have power going to it, you grab the wrong thing and you make the wrong kind of mistake, it hurts. It hurts. It teaches you quick. So that's frustrating, but at the same time, the engineering, the pure engineering ingenuity that goes in, there's over a half mile of cable in a pinball machine. I mean, it's incredible. And so you think about those guys that designed that thing, put it together, and how they thought, and how their brains worked. It's amazing to see, especially the old school EMs like Butterfly that have rotodial swords. There's electromechanicals in there that are clockworks that rotate and click, and you turn it on, you just hear it click up, and it hits. and there's bells everywhere and whistles. Those old school pinballs, I love old school EM pinballs, just for the physic. There's a huge mix of analog and electrical there. The clicks, the whirs, the hums. I love that. The bells. It's even though it doesn't have digital displays on it, and there are great digital display games. I love my hook cabinet. EMs, the pure engineering of EMs is amazing to me. I love them.
Cool. So, are there any like cool mysteries to pinball or things that are like people wouldn't know off the top? You know, like
Yeah, I would say most pinball machines now that would be on the floor now are most pinball machines that you would see everywhere outside of an arcade museum. So those old school EMs like Butterfly and EXO and those older games that have rotodials. They take a lot. They're actually very sturdy machines. But they take a lot of initial repair most of the time if they've been sitting still for many years. A lot of that stuff seizes up, so you don't see those in many arcades. The digital display stuff, I would say on the bottom left of any pinball machine is the play card, and it tells you the different games and how to activate them. Don't be a slap shooter like me. Read the game card, because once you start figuring out, read a couple, Google it and see how to actually interpret those play cards, and it will open that machine up for you. It goes from being this sort of random game where you're just trying to keep a pinball in play to this. You start figuring out how to aim the ball, how to move the ball. If you're not tilting, you're not trying. Banging the machine a little bit, get a little bit of English without hitting the tilt. It starts to get some nuance to it, and there's video online of like pinball tournaments, guys playing tournament class pinball, and you see them working a machine, and there's physicality to it. There's something to it. And as people, one of my favorite parts of running a barcade is seeing these people that haven't played a pinball in 20 years get up and they start to kind of get in the groove of it again, are people that have never encountered one, but they start to do something that they like. They hit something that they like, and they activate a game by mistake, and they keep trying to do it over and over and over again. And they're trying to figure that game out. That's part of the great part of pinball, is that it doesn't have a scroll screen of instructions. You got to figure it out, and there's secret games. Almost every major pinball past System 8 has a secret game that's not on the card that you're trying to figure out to get a high score to bring in a jackpot, which are fun. I mean, that's one of the best things about pinball machines, and it's a physical play, which is really enjoyable. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I have one of those NES Classics, and I'll probably be camping out for the SNES Classic too. And they're really nice, and I've hacked mine, so it's like chock full of like tons. Like I have menus on menus and menus of Game Boy and NES and SNES and stuff.
Right.
But I really want to fix up my Game Boy Color, and replace the speaker on it, give it a color LCD screen.
Oh,
and
those new color LCDs.
They look so good.
They're so good.
Just
backlighting is awesome.
You pop, Pokemon Blue in there.
Yeah.
Pop your batteries in. You got a good looking Game Boy, and it's a totally different experience than playing it on your 3DS from the eShop. It's just it's totally different.
It is.
Analog anything, I'll go to my grave saying it's always better.
Yep. Even the hand feel. I still have my original Game Boy, even though it's heavy, the hand feel is good. I mean, the Game Boy Color was probably the most comfortable handheld I ever had
at that age.
At that age,
yeah.
Now with my big old gremlin hands, it's a lot different.
The original Game Boy is kind of nice.
yeah. That and Game Boy Advance was pretty good too. I actually really liked the feel of Game Boy Advance. I wish they had made it a little bit wider for how big my hands are.
Mm-hmm. It was weird. I was actually a really interesting age, like the perfect age for handheld systems.
Yep.
Because as I got older, like the first Game Boy, I was like, man, this is big. Let's use my right hand for the A button and left hand for B button. But as I got older, I noticed that like the consoles would like go with my hands almost.
Yeah.
So like, my fingers would interlace a certain amount on the Game Boy Color, and they would interlace just a little bit less on the Game Boy Advance. And about the time they were starting to interlace more and more, I got bigger hands. The DS comes out, and it's things change constantly. It's so crazy.
It's kind of wild. I think they made all those. Handhelds for somebody who was like 5'4" back in the day. Like that was the hand size they wanted. And I was a 6-foot kid by age 14, so I was like, I could wrap like a Game Boy in one hand and be like, I'm just gonna poke it
like a tentacle.
Yeah, just like curl up around it. No, I mean, I love those old systems. I have new systems. I have an Xbox One, and I play a lot of games on that when I have time. But I love the fact that I have a home now that have an EM pinball in and can enjoy and kind of tinker with every once in a while.
And going back to the whole like the tinkering and fixing things, like again, I can boot up any emulator and just like be playing Super Mario Brothers, no problems. But if you have an NES, you may have to get down there and blow on
a little bit, and mess with the pins, clean the pins a little bit,
clean them out a little bit with some alcohol swabs.
But the fact that you got a little bit of effort to it is really cool.
But it's so much more rewarding once you finally get it working, because like, yeah, it's really frustrating to like have somebody over and you're like, hey, let's play Mario Brothers, and you pop it in, it's like, okay,
give me a second.
Give me just a second to like get this working. But once you get it working, like the two of you together are gonna be like, oh yeah, we got it.
Because you're sitting on a couch. I mean, we have those console stations at the bar. We have those retro console stations with old school CRTs and couches, and we love the concept of people sitting next to each other, cord in hand, playing a game. Ribbing each other on verses, or if they're playing together on something, talking to each other, communicating face to face.
Man, I love being in there and watching a group of 3 or 4 guys come in, and it never fails. When they see the TV over there, they're like, I got you a Mario Kart. You can't even touch this.
You can't even touch this right now. That's right.
I got Sheik. Where's your Mario at?
Where's your Mario? I got that Sheik now. Yeah.
It's melee action.
Oh. And that's something that I'm hoping that the Switch has kind of worked to try to amend some of that.
Yeah.
Xbox is getting back into the couch play game a little bit, which is good, with Gears and the next Halo that comes out is going to have couch co-op, which is good. I think the new Call of Duty is going to have couch co-op also, and I know Battlefront is.
It's so bad. Like, it had to come with the way that times were changing. There's internet now, and I can just text my friend and be like, "Hey, get on, let's play."
Put on a headset, let's
go. But back then, it was also like when you were growing up, it was a money thing. Like you didn't have your own money. Like your parents bought your games for you.
Yep.
And so during that time, it was like, "Hey, I want to go play Turtles in Time," but Adam has it on SNES. I don't have it.
Yep.
Let's call him up. Let's see if he's home.
Yeah.
And
then we'll go down the street.
Right.
Well, like all my buddies in middle school, early middle school, we had like a game swap group, basically like a game club where we would all buy different games, most of them the co-op games, and that way we could go to each other's houses. Or if I played a game that I liked, he bought a different game that I wanted, and then you swapped, you traded. Yeah. And then you played, and then you traded back. That's how I played Majora's Mask. I couldn't get Majora's Mask. I couldn't even get Ocarina of Time. So my buddy Jason, he bought both of those. He got them for Christmas over the years. And I got like Wave Race. I would get all the co-op stuff. So Wave Race, Jet Force Gemini, Smash Brothers, GoldenEye. I would get those games, and that's what we would trade and rotate. So
your house was a party house.
Well, my house was a stop. Yeah, it was a stop on the way. Which I grew up on a farm out there, so there's always a lot to do. So all your friends could come over. You go outside and play for a while, and then you come inside, and everybody would huddle around the TV.
Right.
Jack in the 64 because you could play 4 people on the N64, and it was mind blowing. Right. And I couldn't afford 4 controllers, so everybody had to bring a controller. But I mean, in some ways, you gotten away from that, and I really hope that they start to figure out. I'm hoping that Xbox One's Microsoft's kind of infusion, PlayStation's getting back into the game too with their sort of pseudo-independent market and putting some money there. During the early Xbox 360 era, that was really where you got those co-op games, those couch co-op games was Xbox Arcade.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll get back to it, and we don't just, and Switch gets back into the game and doesn't just do a bunch more Neo Geo rips and calls them additions to the library, which I love. I love Neo Geo. I have the cabinet. I have original cartridges and hardware. You've played Metal Slug on
it. And going with that, like I told you the other night, my friend came over and we played Metal Slug together. That was the most fun I've had. Like, we play Smash a lot. We play Smash a lot. And Mario Kart a little bit, but like playing that old arcade, there was something about it that like, it kind of rose up the kid in us both. And we became kids again, playing Metal Slug.
Well, Metal Slug too. It's crazy. Like they hit you. It was Contra for the new generation. It was sensory overload, and it was the Rambo era, like big grizzled guys and just knives and guns and explosions and insane odds and one hit death, and it was I mean, it was from the unforgiving era of arcades, which was really fun. You know, that 89 to about 94 era of arcade, where you have these hardcore arcades that are out to get you, and,
Right.
and mastering one and beating one was so important. You know, Neo Geo, that's how the home console. That's how they pitched their home console, was bring the arcade home. You could practice Metal Slug at
Right.
home, and it was almost 1-for-1. I mean, it's incredible. You know, they got these rip boxes now that actually are the old Neo Geo single carts arcades that they ported to run on HDMI that are beautiful and that run the old arcade 64-bit instead of the old 32-bit. So,
And that was the thing about the Switch version, is that like once crap got real crazy on the screen, sure enough, the frame rate dropped a lot.
yep.
And I was like, man, they like purely emulated it like really well.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. But I got to get going because we got to do our work stuff. But I enjoyed having you on. We're going to have you on again in the future.
Awesome.
Because you always have something interesting to say, whether it's about our town Macon or arcades or games or whatever.
We'll hit some of the nerdy stuff in general. We'll try to make it
I
a
somehow
regular
talked
thing.
to you for 30 minutes about Battlefront. I've never played it before.
Yeah, yeah. We'll we'll warm it up here and hit it on the couch co-op one time.
Yeah, that'd be cool too.
When it gets closer to that time.
Yeah, that's something I want to do
Battlefront
with the podcast, is like have these mics set up as we're doing a couch co-op with the game.
I think
or
so.
something.
You know, we've got the Switches too. So as stuff releases for that, we can play and kind of just talk about, like we could play Mario Kart and just talk about Mario Kart through the years.
That'd be cool. Let's set that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do it.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot, and
Yeah.
we'll catch everybody back next time.
Yeah, we'll see you guys. It's good to have you.
All right.